Who is the worst world champion in WWE history? Well, before we get to number 1, let's start with number 10, Braun Strowman. In 2020, WWE finally pulled the trigger and made Braun Strowman a world champion, defeating Goldberg at WrestleMania 36 to win the Universal Championship. Just by watching this footage, you can see one of the main reasons Braun's world title reign was so bad. There were no fans. Now, obviously, that wasn't Strowman's or even WWE's fault, and that's one of the big reasons why I put Strowman low on this list. However, Drew McIntyre won his first world championship the same night as Braun and was in the exact same situation. However, for one, Braun's victory felt more emotional, even without a crowd, and two, McIntyre at least had some decent feuds and matches during his WWE Championship reign. Strowman had none of that. His match against Goldberg at WrestleMania didn't need to be for the Universal Championship to begin with, and the match itself wasn't anything special. The rest of Strowman's title matches weren't much better either. The one positive I will say is that the storyline he had with Bray Wyatt during the Universal title reign was good and done pretty well. Another reason I'm putting him pretty high on this list. But it only gets worse from here. So let's look at number 9, Rey Mysterio. It pains me to say this, but all three of Rey Mysterio's world title reigns kind of sucked. Rey's first world title run happened in 2006. In the aftermath of Eddie Guerrero's passing, Mysterio entered the Royal Rumble at number 2 and lasted over an hour to win the match. He ultimately faced Kurt Angle and Randy Orton at WrestleMania 22 for the World Heavyweight Championship, where Mysterio won in a really feel-good moment. Unfortunately, this was the highlight of the reign. While Rey would get victories over JBL and Randy, he lost a lot of matches. As world champion, Rey Mysterio lost to Rob Van Dam, Kurt Angle, Mark Henry, The Great Khali, and even frickin' Finlay. Sure, these weren't all clean victories, but it didn't make Rey look like a particularly strong champion. And don't forget, during the world title reign, Rey Mysterio would have his infamous title match against Sabu. At ECW One Night Stand, Mysterio fought the death-defying Maniac in an Extreme Rules match for the World Heavyweight Championship. After a DDT through a table, a doctor said neither man could continue. This was all scripted and was such a dumb way to end the match, especially considering this was an ECW show. Regardless, Mysterio would end up losing the world title to Booker T after Chavo Guerrero betrayed Rey. It was just an underwhelming world title reign. There weren't many memorable feuds, matches, or moments. Plus, as previously mentioned, Rey just looked like a chump, and the way the reign ended left a lot to be desired. However, about 5 years later, Mysterio would finally have world title gold around his waist again. A week after CM Punk defeated John Cena at Money in the Bank 2011 and left the company with the WWE Championship, WWE held a tournament to crown a new world champion. Rey Mysterio won it at the beginning of the July 25th, 2011 episode of Raw. He was then forced to face John Cena in the main event, where Super Cena did his thing and Rey never won another world title in WWE. Honestly though, I feel like this world title reign is better remembered than Mysterio's other run. I actually forgot about this, but in 2010, Rey Mysterio became a 2-time World Heavyweight Champion. The Master of the 619 won a Fatal 4-Way match, once again making him the owner of the big gold belt. However, only 28 days after winning it, Mysterio lost it. In his first title defense, Rey Mysterio fought the former champion, Jack Swagger. Rey won, but then Kane, who had won Money in the Bank, cashed in and beat the Masked Luchador. This title reign just felt so pointless. It makes me wonder why WWE didn't just have Rey Mysterio win and lose the world title on the same night. That would have at least garnered Rey some sympathy from the audience and would have made the fans hate Kane more. It's a little sad that, as good a wrestler as Rey Mysterio was and is, he never had a great world championship run. I guess you could argue Rey never really needed it. I mean, look at how popular he is. Someone who could have used a really great world championship reign though is number 8, Dolph Ziggler. Technically, Ziggler is a 2-time world champion. In 2011, Dolph was feuding with the World Heavyweight Champion Edge on SmackDown. Ziggler was in a relationship with Edge's ex-lover, Vickie Guerrero, who was also in charge of the show. In classic heel fashion, Vickie used her power to help Ziggler and hurt Edge. Ultimately, Guerrero fired Edge and awarded the world title to Dolph. However, SmackDown GM Teddy Long returned that same night, brought back Edge, and the Radar Superstar defeated Ziggler to regain the world title. It's difficult even to count this as a world title reign, considering it was so short. However, 2 years later, the show-off would get a proper run with the big gold belt. Sort of. In 2012, Dolph Ziggler won the Money in the Bank contract. He held on to it for months until finally cashing in on the Raw after WrestleMania 29.
Del Rio, but
It was a great moment, and the crowd's reaction when Ziggler's music hit is one of the loudest in WWE history. It was a great way to win the championship, and Dolph's first real world title reign began with a lot of momentum. and it quickly went downhill. Now, part of this is due to unforeseen circumstances. A few weeks after Ziggler won the World Championship, he got injured and was out of action for a month. Rather than stripping him of the title, the show-off remained champion. However, this did damage his title reign. But perhaps what really killed it was WWE themselves. Backstage, Vince McMahon said that Dolph Ziggler was not a top guy, and that Dolph's world title reign was only short-term. It's not surprising then that in Ziggler's first title defense, he lost the World Heavyweight Championship back to Alberto Del Rio. This world title reign also felt like it killed Ziggler's popularity with fans. A lot of people were really high on Dolph, but after this, fans realized WWE was never going to push Ziggler to the level they wanted, and because of that, Ziggler's popularity declined. That's how bad of a world title reign this was, but it still wasn't as bad as number 7, Rob Van Dam. RVD holds an interesting record. He's the only WWE World Champion to be arrested while holding the title. But allow me to explain. At ECW One Night Stand 2006, Rob Van Dam challenged John Cena for the WWE Championship. The two had a tremendous match that saw a number of crazy shenanigans. This benefited RVD, and he won the WWE Championship. It was a great victory. However, people forget that at the time, there was some concern that WWE would have stripped Van Dam of the title due to the previously mentioned shenanigans. This ended up not being the case, but in the moment, fans didn't know, and it put a slight damper on the victory. Little did they know what was going to come. RVD would remain WWE Champion for about 3 weeks, but soon, things hit the fan. While driving in Ohio, Rob Van Dam was pulled over for speeding. RVD was arrested and ended up having to pay a $140 fine. That was nothing though compared to what happened in WWE. Immediately, Rob Van Dam was defeated and lost the WWE Championship and was then suspended for 30 days. Van Dam's WWE World Championship reign never really got started, and it ended in spectacular fashion. Unfortunately, there were no second chances, as Rob Van Dam never won another world title in WWE again. But hey, neither did number 6, Diesel. Diesel, also known as Kevin Nash, is often regarded as one of the worst WWE World Champions, simply due to a decline in attendance at WWE shows during his reign. In general though, it was less about Diesel being WWE champ and more of a general slump in business that caused this to happen. Now saying that, Diesel was not a great WWE champion. For one, Diesel was a babyface, a good guy. Not inherently bad, but as fans discovered in WCW, Kevin Nash worked much better as a villain. Additionally, because he was a face, Nash had to wrestle against guys like King Mabel, Sid, the British Bulldog, and others. Not bad wrestlers at all, but they just weren't opponents who could bring out the best in Diesel. Even though Diesel was WWE champion for close to a year, he didn't make much of an impact. It just felt like it was a perfect storm of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, and unfortunately, Kevin Nash would never touch a WWE World Championship again. This next wrestler wouldn't either, but for more tragic reasons, and that's number 5, Big E. Big E cashing his Money in the Bank contract to win the WWE Championship was a feel-good moment. However, after that, his title reign was, to be honest, not that impressive. There were several issues, but one of the biggest was that Big E's WWE Championship reign coincided with Roman Reigns' Universal Championship reign and the Bloodline storyline. WWE clearly favored one world champion over the other, and this became very obvious when you look at the pay-per-views. During Big E's 110 days as WWE Champion, Roman Reigns main evented every pay-per-view event. The only times Big E was in the main event was when he fought Roman Reigns at Survivor Series and lost. Then, Big E was also in the main event at the Day 1 pay-per-view, but that was only because Roman Reigns contracted COVID-19 and couldn't compete. I'm not saying Big E needed to be in every pay-per-view event, but WWE prioritizing Roman Reigns in the Universal Championship did not help Big E's world title reign. Because of that, there weren't a whole lot of memorable moments during Big E's championship reign, making it feel even more lackluster. To make matters worse, Big E lost the WWE Championship to Brock Lesnar at the previously mentioned Day 1 event, and was never given his championship rematch. Big E's World Championship reign feels very similar to when CM Punk won the World Heavyweight Championship in 2008, or when Chris Jericho became the undisputed WWE Champion. Despite being the world champ, all three played second fiddle to either another champion or just other wrestlers on the roster. Unlike Jericho and Punk though, who went on to have better World Championship reigns, Big E would not. Just a couple of months after losing the WWE title, Big E would suffer a career-ending injury, not only ending any hopes of a second world title reign, but also preventing him from ever wrestling again. Number 4, Goldberg. Now, this one might be a bit controversial. Goldberg's very first WWE world title reign in 2003 wasn't awful, but I don't think it was very good either. Part of that may have been that Goldberg's first run in WWE, in general, was a mixed bag. A lot of the time, WWE had Goldberg in matches that were too long and didn't play to his strengths. Now, when Goldberg returned to WWE in 2016, they worked this out. His matches were much shorter, and Goldberg was able to do what he did best. However, this came at a cost. In Goldberg's third match since he returned, Da Man took on Kevin Owens for the Universal Championship. Goldberg beat KO in 22 seconds to win the Universal title. Goldberg carried the belt for a few weeks before losing it to Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 33. It was such a short and uneventful title reign, and it was strictly there to give Lesnar and Goldberg's match a bit more hype, which it didn't need at all. Additionally, Owens getting a victory over Goldberg and retaining the Universal title would have done far more for KO than it did for Goldberg. What makes it even worse is that WWE did it again! 3 years later, Goldberg returned and defeated The Fiend to regain the Universal Championship. And, just like before, Goldberg carried the title into WrestleMania 36 and was defeated by Braun Strowman. This was another short and pointless world title reign, and once again, The Fiend Bray Wyatt would have benefited way more from a victory over Goldberg than the other way around. Both of these Universal Championship reigns were just unnecessary. They didn't really help Goldberg, and they actually hurt the people he took the titles from. Number 3, Jack Swagger. I actually personally like Jack Swagger, but even I'll say his world title reign was a flop. Well, technically, Swagger was a 2-time world champion. In early 2009, Swagger won the ECW championship, which was a world title. That reign was fine, but nothing special. After it was over, the All-American American was moved to Raw. He challenged for the United States title and was part of some bigger storylines, like when he was a member of Team Raw at Bragging Rights. However, Jack Swagger's big moment came at WrestleMania 26. Swagger competed and won the Money in the Bank ladder match, although he had some trouble getting the briefcase down. This would be a foreshadowing of what was to come. While he didn't pull a Seth Rollins and cash in during the WrestleMania main event, Swagger did use his contract just a few days later, defeating the World Heavyweight Champion Chris Jericho on SmackDown. Almost instantly, the first problem in Swagger's title reign was revealed. He lost the majority of his matches. Now, to be fair, Jack Swagger was a heel, so he should be beatable, but WWE had Swagger losing to John Morrison and Kofi Kingston, 2 mid-carders. Even as a heel champion though, you still need some credibility, and considering where Morrison and Kingston were on the totem pole, Jack Swagger should have definitely beaten them. However, that's not what made Jack Swagger's world title reign so bad. Swagger wasn't that great on the microphone, and he wasn't that compelling or that entertaining of a character. I'll give it to Swagger. He tried, but the man just didn't have it. The All-American needed a manager to do the talking for him, but WWE had nothing. It's not surprising that after this world title reign, WWE paired Swagger with Vicky Guerrero and then Zeb Coulter. Another factor that hindered Swagger's world title reign was the lack of notable championship matches, or memorable moments in general. In fact, Swagger's rematch after he lost the world title was probably the best, since he got thrown into the ocean. Alright, now, there's only ever been 2 Indian world champions in WWE, the Great Khali and Jinder Mahal. Unfortunately, neither one of them had a great world title reign. I wanted to choose just one though for this top 10. So, who was the worst champion? Great Khali or Jinder Mahal? The main criticism of Khali's time as world champion was his wrestling ability. He had difficulty moving in the ring and performing moves in general. Mahal, on the other hand, had spent years mostly losing and was considered in the low mid-card. Then, in the span of a few weeks, he was WWE champion. Again, both of these world title reigns were bad, but which one was the worst? Well, for number 2, I'm gonna go with Jinder Mahal. From Khali's debut to his winning the World Heavyweight Championship, he was consistently portrayed as a monster, having even defeated The Undertaker. Jinder Mahal, on the other hand, had been an enhancement talent for years. Nothing wrong with that, and the stuff he did with 3MB was great. But going from that to WWE Champion didn't feel believable, and this plagued Mahal's entire WWE Championship reign. On top of that, the average quality of Mahal's matches as WWE Champ weren't great. That's not surprising though, considering Jinder went from wrestling 3 to 5 minute matches to being put in pay-per-view main events in a very short time. That's a lot to learn, and WWE didn't give Jinder the time to learn it. It was just a recipe for disaster, and it makes Jinder the second worst WWE World Champion. But who's below that? Well, before we get to that, here are a few dishonorable mentions. Alberto Del Rio. I was thinking of including the Mexican aristocrat on this list, primarily because of his 2 pointless WWE Championship reigns in 2011. Yes, he did win that title 2 times. However, Del Rio's time as World Heavyweight Champion was good, especially his matches with Rob Van Dam, and since we're basing this list on all of a wrestler's world title reigns, I couldn't include Del Rio. Sergeant Slaughter, one of the earliest examples of a transitional champion. Slaughter won the WWE Championship in 1991, defeating the Ultimate Warrior at the Royal Rumble. The only reason WWE had Slaughter win the world title was so that he could lose it to Hogan at WrestleMania 7. You're really at a disadvantage when your title reign exists just for it to end. Making matters worse is that fans weren't even that interested in Slaughter and Hogan's feud. WWE actually had to move WrestleMania 7 to a smaller venue because ticket sales were so low. Unfortunately for Slaughter, he had to bear having a pretty lousy world title reign. Additional dishonorable mentions go out to world champions like Andre the Giant, Finn Balor, Stan Stasiak, Ezekiel Jackson, and others who are really short. I didn't include any of these on the main top 10 because they never got started. Plus, guys like Andre and Finn Balor were at least worthy of being world champions, and if they had proper title reigns, it's reasonable to assume they would have been great champions. Alright, now it's time for number 1. The worst world champion in WWE history is Vince McMahon. It's hard to believe, but Vince McMahon is a 2-time world champion. His first world title reign came when he won the WWE Championship in late 1999. On an episode of SmackDown, McMahon, with some help from Stone Cold Steve Austin, defeated the WWE Champion Triple H. More than anything, this was done just for shock value, because a few days later on Raw, McMahon vacated the title. It's painful to see the owner of a company give themselves a championship, especially the world title, but at least it was over quickly. That was not the case with Vince McMahon's second world championship reign though. In 2007, McMahon was feuding with Bobby Lashley as part of the Battle of the Billionaires feud with Donald Trump. Lashley was ECW world champion at the time, so McMahon set up a 3-on-1 handicap match. Vince, Umaga, and Shane McMahon fought Lashley for the ECW title. The numbers won out, and Vince McMahon became the new ECW champion. It's always lame when a non-wrestler wins a championship, but it's especially lame when it's a world title. Yes, wrestling is all scripted, but the world championships mean something, and the ECW championship meant a lot. This is the same title that guys literally took years off their lives to fight for, and now here it was around Vince McMahon's waist. WWE's version of ECW was dead on arrival, but this was the fatal blow, both to the ECW brand and the World Championship. Making matters worse was how long McMahon's title reign went on for. Like I said, Vince's WWE title reign was over as soon as it started, but his ECW title reign lasted over a month. It felt even longer with how often Vince McMahon would appear on both Raw and ECW. Do-rag and all. Now, being a bad champion is one thing, but what about making a bad return? To see which wrestlers had the worst returns of all time, watch the video on screen.